We're getting to a critical mass where Trump just doesn't care. He's not going to have to go up for election again. So the whole Harvard Trump, Harvard Trump, Harvard Trump, Harvard Trump, I'm getting so tired of all my conservative fellow.
It's worse. Much worse than everyone had anticipated. The political elite listens to Victor Davis Hanson and shudders when he speaks, because he doesn't engage in deceptive tactics, sugarcoating, or false hope. He presents harsh realities that are honed by logic, hardened by history, and directly targeted at the core of America's disintegration. And now, you will be completely shocked by what he is revealing. Hanson reveals who is causing the decay in this shocking exposé, in addition to diagnosing it. He depicts a vision of rapid collapse rather than gradual decline, from militarized bureaucracy and corrupted institutions to a collapsing border and cultural amnesia. What occurs when a country loses sight of its roots? Who benefits from planned turmoil, and who bears the consequences? And you'll realize how far down the rabbit hole goes after hearing what Hanson discloses. Stay tuned, because what's coming is a raw, unfiltered breakdown of where we really are, and where we might be heading if nothing changes. Don't look away. Don't scroll past. There's more to this than just commentary, so stay tuned until the very end. It serves as a warning. Additionally, it may be the most significant thing you hear this week. He isn't following the conventional political rules because he doesn't have another election to win. This means that he is attacking his ideological foes, particularly prestigious universities like Harvard, rather than modifying his rhetoric to appeal to swing votes or moderates. Imagine Trump in full rogue mode, acting as he pleases despite criticism. This is a critique of right-wing commentators who consistently blame Harvard and other prestigious universities for the deterioration of education and morals. But they do it in polite essays and think pieces. The speaker is frustrated by this never-ending round of idle talk. Trump, on the other hand, is acting, albeit erratically. Trump's criticism of institutions is frenzied, loud, and blunt. He isn't just focusing on the flawed policies. He's making a big deal out of it. Shock techniques may be required to overcome academia's institutional hubris and denial, despite the fact that some claim this might be counterproductive. Put aside the claim that prestigious schools are being unfairly singled out. They are said to be financially invincible. Universities greatly increased their DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion expenditures after George Floyd, sometimes reaching hundreds of millions of dollars. Therefore, when Trump proposes reducing financing or exerting pressure, he is merely challenging their ideological monopoly rather than completely bankrupting them. Many universities covertly carried on with race-based admissions through backdoors like essays, affinity housing, or hiring pipelines after the Supreme Court invalidated the practice in 2023. Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard
Is using a blunderbuss. He's using an axe when he should be using a surgical knife. And it's counterproductive because he says all kind of crazy things he'd like to he's harming all of these wonderful programs. No, he's not. They have plenty of money. Why don't they just go back to the budget pre-George Floyd? That's when they spent all this money.
This argument contends that Trump's warpath is not arbitrary. It's a reaction to the nation's top court being disregarded by elites. Millions from nations like China and Qatar have been admitted to Harvard and other universities, frequently with little to no transparency. Critics claim that this creates opportunities for foreign influence, particularly when speakers with ties to the CCP are invited to events or programs. Here, the speaker charges that powerful organizations are ignoring or even condoning overt anti-Semitism. It alludes to recent university gatherings when, in spite of verifiable charges of harassment or violence, students who organized violent or disruptive anti-Israel demonstrations were recognized or given the opportunity to speak at graduation. This charge is at the center of continuing discussions concerning hate speech versus free speech on college campuses. This phrase compares an authoritarian government to Harvard's ideological homogeneity. Although this is exaggerated, it makes the point that conservative voices are almost completely absent from many prestigious academic circles, which creates an echo chamber. Chinese agents transporting agricultural diseases into the United States in an effort at biological sabotage. It reflects both genuine worries about agroterrorism, attacks intended to destroy the food supply, and anxieties expressed in popular culture, such as The Last of Us. These concerns are heightened by reports of Chinese researchers connected to dubious laboratory operations at American universities. A fungus apocalypse no longer feels like science fiction, because of the story alludes to the popular television show The Last of Us. Although clearly exaggerated, national security specialists take seriously the possibility that hostile actors could use mold or fungi as weapons for biosabotage. When foreigners have access to U.S. university labs, that anxiety is heightened. Here, it is asserted that Chinese international students must put the interests of the Communist Party first while they are overseas. This appeals to enduring worries about spying.
They really do. I mean, by the higher courts, they've got to intervene and say, you know what, look in the mirror, you're a district judge, and your duties and your authorities are to adjudicate cases that arise in your regions.
There may be pressure on certain Chinese nationals researching delicate subjects, such as biotechnology or agriculture, to communicate knowledge back home, or even to participate in coordinated activities. This goes beyond theory. There are actual instances of Chinese nationals buying land close to American military sites. Bipartisan anxiety has been aroused, whether for strategic leverage or espionage purposes. This becomes a national security red signal due to Trump's rhetoric, which exacerbates broader concerns about Chinese influence in American society. The conclusion is scathing, claiming that China not only engaged in carelessness or misconduct that led to the COVID pandemic, but also took use of Western political sensitivities to shift the responsibility. Although it has historically been common practice to name viruses by geography, Trump and his supporters were accused of racism for identifying the virus's birthplace. The speaker contends that the CCP's propaganda might and the intellectual weakness of the West are exposed by this double standard. Trump's approach is chaotic. He mimics the disorder of the institutions he targets rather than attempting to win over civilized society. Trump uses his own style of political theater to mimic the supposed lawlessness, ideological rigidity, and arrogance of elite academia.
He had a record deportation day that got all these people angry when they announced there was 800 people that were deported or scheduled to be deported.
His supporters contend that this is strategic disruption rather than insanity. In the middle of crucial international discussions, a single district judge in Texas or California, two of the lowest levels of the federal judiciary, issues a broad court order that immediately undermines the president's foreign policy. That's what's going on right now. With a single decision, a judge who was not chosen by the people can suddenly overrule the president. Even worse, these judges don't care that they could be reversed in a few months, because the political harm has already been done by the time a higher court gets involved. Similar to a tag team wrestling match, one judge interrupts the proceedings for 3 months and then tags the next one in to continue the mayhem. The outcome? Judicial activism that erodes public confidence in the courts and the underpinnings of presidential power. Congress is losing ground to these regional judges, many of whom are supported by activist networks such as legal organizations funded by Soros. They are doing more than simply interpreting the law. The national policy is being reshaped. Even though they are well aware of the legal mess they are causing, they are doing it with a swagger by rendering decisions that extend way beyond their areas of expertise. For many of them, political opposition is more important than justice. The irony?
The deportations, and if he were to do that, he would start back at square one where we had a pre-existing illegal alien population of somewhere between 12 and 20 million. So it's kind of like the debt. It's such a staggering sum that you don't even have an iota of idea. You don't even know how to approach the problem.
These judges are today viewed as more powerful policymakers than the House, Senate, or even the Supreme Court, despite their lowly status. Unchecked and praised in elite legal circles, that kind of unaccountable authority jeopardizes democracy and the separation of powers. People went crazy when Donald Trump deported 800 unauthorized migrants in one day, setting a record. To put it in perspective, however, an estimated 8,000 migrants crossed the border daily under President Biden. This is about 250,000 every month, or 3 million annually, when multiplied by 30. That comes to 12 million over 4 years. Deportation efforts would therefore need to rise tenfold just to break even in order to keep up with that deluge of unlawful entrants. not to mention the 12 to 20 million people who have already arrived from prior years. How big of a crisis? Almost unimaginable. Similar to the national debt, the issue has gotten so out of hand that most lawmakers are unsure of where to begin. What occurs when millions of people move into a nation without accountability, integration, or clear expectations? Communities are subtly eroding at the edges. Illegal dumping, disrespect for local regulations, and the developing mindset that America doesn't care, so why should I, are all becoming more prevalent in rural areas. It's not about race, which is the sad thing. It's about showing respect for the land, the law, and those who follow the law. What incentive is there to follow the law when a nation delivers the message that anyone can break the law and still get benefits like housing, public aid, and education? For some newcomers, appreciation is replaced by contempt. And locals? They are left to literally mop up the mess. This is where everything goes awry. When a citizen is stopped for speeding, they receive a ticket, a fine, and other procedures. But what about an undocumented person with 7 passengers packed in the back seat of a car belonging to a trafficker and no license? Many police officers will simply release them. Why? Paperwork, bureaucratic chaos, apprehension over being called racist.
And I said, well, how would I get one? And they said, if you have a relative, you can drive to Texas.
Therefore, law enforcement subtly adjusts by enforcing the law against law-abiding people while ignoring those who pose a real threat. It's a disheartening, flawed system that makes it very evident that, in modern America, following the law can make you a target while breaking it might get you a pass. Progressive politics once depended on unity via identity, gender, and race, what some referred to as intersectionality. However, that alliance is disintegrating. Why? Because Americans of all races, who make up the working class, are tired. According to recent surveys, 62% of Hispanic Americans backed Donald Trump during his first few months in office. In fact, 39% of Black Americans said they trusted his leadership. Why? Because class issues, economics, safety, and job security are more important to many people than identity politics. They've had enough of genuine families struggling to make ends meet, while media celebrities like Brittany Griner and Angel Reese are portrayed as models of development. The so-called Rainbow Coalition has given way to a more grounded reality. Americans, regardless of race, want fairness, safety, and opportunity. Not lectures, not mayhem, and most definitely not unfair treatment. Whether it's a border crisis that is out of control, the judiciary overriding presidential authority, or a selectively applied law enforcement system, one thing is certain. America is coming to terms with its past. With its institutions, not its values. The trust that keeps everything together could fall apart if the government, the courts, and the media don't change their ways quickly.
Extrapolated to the entire nation, that's something maybe for the appellate courts, circuit courts to adjudicate, or us, but just stay in your lane.
This criticism is not merely partisan. It serves as a warning. Millions of Americans from all walks of life are beginning to experience the effects of it. California isn't getting smaller, despite headlines that suggest otherwise. To inflate population statistics, officials frequently count undocumented immigrants as residents. Beneath the surface, however, native-born Americans are quietly leaving in large numbers, particularly middle-class families. California's native population is declining, concealing a more serious catastrophe under the appearance of demographic stability. Nothing better captures the tremendous migration of California than the moving truck sector. When a Central Valley resident attempted to rent a trailer in order to relocate to Texas, they were informed that none were available. Why? As it's already being done by everyone. No one is returning the trailers that are pouring into California. While moving in California is sometimes free, moving out costs between $1,500 and $2,500. That's economic reality expressed in diesel fumes, not simply anecdotal evidence. There is a disturbing trend in places like Fresno and Sacramento. People are disappearing. Boise, Houston, Nashville, and even little border communities like State Line, Nevada, have seen the departure of longtime neighbors. Families are escaping California due to the breakdown of the social contract, rather than the drought, making it a modern-day reverse Dust Bowl. California has an oppressive tax system. In return for subpar public services, residents pay the highest income taxes, premium gas taxes, and exorbitant sales taxes. Nationally, public schools are ranked close to the bottom. Major cities like San Francisco now have crime rates that are on par with the worst in the country.
We're getting to a critical mass where Trump just doesn't care. He's not going to have to go up for election again. So the whole Harvard, Trump, Harvard, Trump, Harvard, Trump, Harvard, Trump. I'm getting so tired of all my conservative fellow.
In the meantime, the promise of all that tax money is betrayed by hazardous highways and deteriorating infrastructure. 1/3 of America's welfare claimants reside in California, despite the state being one of the richest in the union. This area is home to almost half of all Medi-Cal beneficiaries, the state's Medicaid program. Medi-Cal covers an astounding 40 to 50% of all births in the state. How is it possible that 21% of people in a state with such abundant resources live below the poverty line? A massive social engineering endeavor has accompanied California's transition to a one-party system. Large-scale expenditures on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs have turned into a bureaucracy that prioritizes complaints above opportunities. It has led to dependency and resentment rather than empowerment. Discontent was financed by the political elite, who were then attacked by the same forces they had unleashed. California's progressive promise was formerly promoted by Silicon Valley titans like David Sacks, Ben Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, and Elon Musk. Now, though, the alarm is being sounded. They have built the state's innovation empire and invested trillions in the global tech sector, but they are still being singled out by activists and subject to additional levies. They despise our guts, Andreessen famously acknowledged. These are liberals and centrists who are seeing the dangers of ideological overreach, not conservatives. Nearly half of all homeless people in America currently reside in California. Billions of dollars have been spent on solutions, but the problem just gets worse. Freeway underpasses are lined with tents. Skid Row is expanding daily. In a bizarre turn of events, the governor of the nation's most progressive state, Gavin Newsom, has begun to blame Trump for the defeat. The streets are still broken even though the funds were spent, the programs were increased, and the slogans were yelled. California, once the land of opportunity, is now a warning. A place where services are failing, working families are heavily taxed, and ideological rigidity takes precedence over outcomes. Millions of people are silently casting their ballots by moving away from their childhood homes, family ties, and sunshine in search of a more affordable life elsewhere. The dream didn't die right away, but for those who created it, it eventually lost its appeal. It's terrifying what Victor Davis Hanson just disclosed, and it's just the beginning. Stay ahead of the curve by subscribing for more in-depth analyses like this one. What do you believe to be the greatest danger that we now face? We're listening, so share your opinions in the comments below.